July 2004, Los Angeles County Court. 11 people sat in that courtroom, silent and tense, all of them Marlon Brando's children, all together for the first time since their father died a month earlier. Christian sat in the corner, recently released from prison for murder. Rebecca was next to him, Miko was behind. The others were scattered. Most hadn't spoken to each other in years, but today they were all there for the same reason: $100 million inheritance. The judge banged on the bench and the hearing began. Brando's will was about to be read, and everyone expected a fair distribution. The lawyer stood up, opened the envelope, and began to read. After the first paragraph, the silence in the room was broken. One person jumped up, another began to cry, another yelled at the lawyer. Because Marlon Brando's last will and testament was not fair, it was not logical, and for some, it was even cruel. The words written in that document would pit 11 siblings against each other, sever the family's last remaining ties, and start a decade-long battle in the court corridors. But no one in that room knew that Brando's will was not just a document, it was a letter of revenge, and some of the children were completely left out of that revenge. For more truths about Hollywood's dark side, please click the subscribe button. Now let's talk about how Marlon Brando died, what he wrote in his will, and how he tore his family apart forever. On a July 2004 night, 80-year-old Marlon Brando took his last breath at the UCLA Medical Center. His body had been failing for years. Obesity had consumed him. His heart couldn't take it anymore. His lungs weren't enough. His son Miko was there. His daughter Rebecca was there. A few close friends were there. But most of his 11 children weren't there because Brando didn't call them. He didn't want them. He hadn't even seen some of them in recent years. When the doctors pronounced him dead, Miko cried. But his tears were not only from grief, they were also from fear, because he knew that his father's death was not an end, but a beginning. While Brando was alive, he held his family together with power, money, and fear. But now that power was gone, and only money remained, and that money would sever the family's last remaining ties. The funeral was held a week later, a small and quiet ceremony. The press was not invited. Hollywood did not come. Only the family was there. Brando's body was cremated, and his ashes scattered in 3 places: his island in Tahiti, Death Valley, and the ocean. This was his wish, written in his will. But there was much more written in his will, and no one was ready yet to learn the truth. 2 weeks after the funeral, the lawyer gathered the children together. The meeting place was Brando's lawyer's office in Beverly Hills, an old building, dark and cold. 11 children came, some from Los Angeles, some from Tahiti, some from France. They were all curious. They were all anxious. They were all hopeful. Because Marlon Brando was a rich man. He had earned over $100 million in his career. He had real estate. He had investments. He had an island in Tahiti. And now that fortune would be divided among 11 children, everyone would get their share, fair and equal. At least that's what they thought. The lawyer placed a folder on the table, put on his glasses, and cleared his throat. He said this was Marlon Brando's final will and testament, signed 3 months ago, notarized, legally binding. Then he began to read. The first page was formal language, legalese. No one understood it. But on the second page, the numbers began, and that's when the silence was broken. The shocking provisions of the will and the first reactions. Brando's total fortune was officially estimated at $100 million, but the figure in the will was much lower. The lawyer said liquid assets were $30 million, real estate $15 million, investments $20 million. Tetiaroa Island was invaluable, but estimated at $25 million, a total of around $90 million. But this money would not be divided equally among 11 children. The lawyer continued reading, and with each line, the tension in the room grew. $30 million was allocated to the children in Tahiti, Tarita Teripaya's children, Tehotu, and Cheyenne's son Tuki. Rebecca received $10 million. Miko received $5 million plus the right to use the house on Mulholland Drive. The other children received much less. Christian got only $1 million. Mavita's other children got $2 million. And the most shocking part was that some children weren't even mentioned in the will, as if they didn't exist. Chaos broke out in the room. Christian jumped up, yelled at the lawyer, and asked why his father had punished him. Another child started crying, asking why the Tahitians got everything. Miko sat quietly because at least he had received something, but he felt guilty, sensing his siblings' gaze upon him. But there were even more surprising items in the will. Tetiaroa Island, Brando's private paradise in Tahiti, the island he had owned for 37 years, was left to no child. Brando had donated the island to a newly established foundation, the Brando Tetiaroa Foundation, whose purpose was environmental protection and ecological tourism. The children were stunned. That island was like their father's heart. He had spent years there. He had married there. He had had children there. But now that island was no longer theirs. It belonged to a foundation, and the children had no say over it. They could only visit as guests. Another shocking clause was that the mansion on Mulholland Drive was left to Miko, but not the property itself, only the right to live there for life. Miko could live there, but couldn't sell it, rent it, or leave it to someone else. When he died, the house would go to the foundation. What kind of inheritance was this? The children asked. Didn't our father trust us? Was he punishing us? The lawyer couldn't answer, only saying that Brando had written the will himself, signed it himself, that it was his final wish. But everyone in the room knew there was something behind this wish: anger, disappointment, revenge. Christian Brando's world fell apart when he heard the will. $1 million. Just $1 million. While his siblings were getting $10 million, $20 million, he was getting only $1 million. And the reason was clear. In 1990, Christian had killed his sister Cheyenne's boyfriend, Doug Drolle, in his father's house on Mulholland Drive, with a single bullet. The court had ruled it manslaughter, not murder, and Christian had been sentenced to 10 years but was out after 5. Brando had cried in the courtroom, defending his son, saying he was a bad father, that it was his fault. But deep down, Brando never forgave his son. When Christian pulled the trigger, he had also shot Brando's heart and destroyed his family. Because after witnessing the murder, Cheyenne lost her mental health, underwent psychiatric treatment, and fell into depression. And in 1995, at only 25 years old, she hanged herself in Tahiti. 2 children, one committed murder, the other committed suicide. And Brando saw both as Christian's fault. In his will, he left Christian $1 million, adding a note. The lawyer didn't read the note, but Christian saw it later. The note was short, just a few words. Because of what you did to my family, I'm doing this to you. Christian couldn't hold back his tears when he left the office. He didn't look at his siblings, didn't talk to anyone, got in his car and drove off. He didn't know where he was going. He just wanted to get away. He knew his father loved him so little, but he still hoped. Maybe he had softened in his old age. Maybe he had forgiven him, but he hadn't. Brando carried his anger to the grave and used his will like a weapon. Christian went to a bar that night, drank, got drunk. The next day, he hired a lawyer. He would contest the will because this was unfair, this was unjust, this was the cruelest thing a father could do to his son. And Christian wasn't alone. The other children were hiring lawyers too. Others were contesting it. A court battle was about to commence. The most controversial part of the will was the enormous share that went to the Tahitian children. Tehotu, Brando's son with Tarita Teripaya, received $15 million. Cheyenne's son Tuki, Brando's grandson, received $15 million. Tarita herself received $5 million as his former wife. A total of $35 million went to the Tahitian side. The American children were furious. How could this be fair? Even if Christian had been convicted of murder, did he deserve $1 million? What had the other children done to receive $2 million? Why did the Tahitians get everything? The answer was simple but painful. Brando had spent his last years in Tahiti, escaping American life, disgusted with Hollywood, estranged from his children. Tahiti was his escape, his oblivion, his forgiveness. He loved Tarita, perhaps his only true love. Cheyenne was the apple of his eye, the child he loved most. But when Cheyenne died, Brando was devastated and saw Christian as the culprit. The Tahitian children reminded him of his father, of happy days. The American children reminded him of his failures, disappointments, and pain. And Brando, in his final will, rewarded those he loved and punished those he didn't. But the Tahitian children didn't earn that money easily either. There was another clause in the will, a very secret clause, one that the lawyer skipped over on the first reading. There was a condition for Tehotu and Tuki to receive their money. They had to join the board of the Brando Foundation and play an active role in the ecological transformation of Tetiaroa Island. If they refused, the money would go to the foundation. What did this mean? Even when leaving money to his children, Brando wanted to control them, to manage their lives, to make them submit even after his death. Tehotu and Tuki accepted because they had no other choice. But something inside them broke because they realized that their father hadn't even loved them completely, that he had seen them as tools he wanted to use for the future of the island. 2 months after the will was announced, Miko Brando found something while cleaning her father's house on Mulholland Drive. In his father's desk drawer, among old papers, was an envelope. Handwritten on it, Final Will and Testament, dated December 2003. Miko opened the envelope, read it, and was shocked. He realized this will was completely different from the version presented by the lawyers in March 2004. In this old version, the money was divided equally, with each child receiving approximately $7 million. There were no privileges for the Tahitians, no penalty for Christian. Tetiaroa Island was still left to the foundation, but the children were given a say over the island. Miko called the lawyers and showed them the document. The lawyers examined it and confirmed that yes, it also bore Brando's signature, and yes, it was also notarized. But the problem was that the new will was dated more recently, meaning that legally, the new will was valid. But the question was, what had Brando experienced in the last 3 months that made him completely change his will? Who influenced him? Who told him what? Miko was suspicious. His father's last 3 months had been strange. His health was very poor. He was in the hospital, taking medication, and some days he was not fully conscious. And during that time, there were people around him, new people Miko didn't know. A consultant came and went. They said he was in charge of financial matters. A lawyer came. They said he was dealing with the will. Miko now understood. Perhaps they had manipulated him while his father's mind was clouded. Perhaps they had forced him to sign the new will. Miko decided to take his suspicions to court. If manipulation was proven, the new will could be invalidated, and the old will could be valid. And then everyone could get their fair share. Miko informed his other siblings. Some welcomed the news with joy, others with suspicion. Because Miko was advantaged in the new will. The house had been left to him, and he had received 5 million. So why was he now defending the old will? Did he really want justice, or was he trying to clear his name? There was no trust, no love, only money, and that money was eroding the last pieces of the family. In August 2004, a month after the will was announced, the first lawsuit was filed. Christian Brando's lawyer filed a petition with the court. Marlon Brando's March 2004 will should be invalidated because Brando was under the influence of drugs at the time, unable to make sound decisions, and had been manipulated. Then, a week later, Rebecca filed a lawsuit, claiming that the Tahiti discrimination in the will was unfair and that all children should be treated equally. Then Movita's children filed a lawsuit, claiming that the share allocated to their mother was too small, that Movita was Brando's legal wife and deserved more. Within a month, 5 separate lawsuits were filed, and the court system was flooded with the Brando family's battle. The judge looked at the cases and realized that this was not a simple inheritance case, but the beginning of a battle that would last 10 years. At the first hearing, the judge brought all parties together and suggested a settlement. He said, "The lawyers will get rich from this battle. You will become poorer. Settle. Resolve it among yourselves." But there was no settlement because no one was backing down. Everyone wanted their rights. Everyone wanted to correct the injustice. The court process moved slowly. Experts were appointed, and Brando's health in his final months was investigated. Doctors testified, and Brando's medication records were examined. The result was complex. Yes, Brando was taking painkillers. He was using sleeping pills, and some days his consciousness was clouded. But according to the records, he was lucid when he signed the will. There were 2 witnesses at the notary. Brando had read every page and approved every clause. Manipulation could not be proven. The judge dismissed Christian's case. But the other cases continued. Rebecca claimed that her father's decision to favor his Tahitian children was discrimination. The lawyers objected, saying that a person can leave as much as they want to whomever they want in their will. It is their legal right. The judge dismissed Rebecca's case as well. But Rebecca appealed. Years passed, the cases became entangled, and each dismissal turned into a new appeal. 2005, 2006, 2007 passed. There were no family gatherings, no birthday celebrations, only encounters in the court corridors, each time colder and more distant. By 2008, a terrible truth emerged. Nearly $40 million of Brando's $90 million estate had gone to lawyers' fees. Every lawsuit, every appeal, every hearing, every expert report meant money. And they were paying that money from the inheritance. The judge had an interim calculation done and was shocked. If the lawsuits continued like this, in 10 years more than half of the inheritance would go to the lawyers, and almost nothing would be left for the children. The judge again proposed a settlement, again bringing the parties together. This time, some of the children listened because they were afraid. They saw their money disappearing. But some still resisted. Christian resisted especially because he was the child who suffered the most. $1 million was nothing. It didn't even cover the lawyer fees. Christian's lawyers deferred the fee, saying they would take it if they won, but they didn't win. In 2008, Christian Brando died of pneumonia at the age of 50 in a hospital, alone. He never saw his will, never got his money. In an interview before his death, he said, "My father killed me twice, once by not giving me his love while he was alive, and once by not giving me his money after he died." After Christian died, the lawsuit slowed down a bit but didn't stop. Because now Christian's share was also being disputed. Who would get that $1 million? Christian didn't have any children of his own, but his mother, Movita, was still alive. Movita wanted that money, saying it was her son's right. But the Brando Foundation objected, arguing that the will contained a clause stating that the share of a deceased child would go to the foundation. A new lawsuit was filed. Movita won, and Christian's $1 million went to his mother. But after paying her lawyer's fees, Movita was left with $300,000. She was trying to live on that money, 85 years old, alone, once Brando's wife, now struggling with poverty. In 2014, exactly 10 years after Brando's death, the court battle finally ended. All lawsuits had been dismissed, all appeals lost. Brando's March 2004 will was deemed valid. But there wasn't much left to divide. $50 million of the $90 million estate had gone to lawyers' fees, court costs, expert witnesses, and taxes. $40 million remained. It was divided again according to the proportions in the will. The Tahiti children received $15 million. Rebecca received $6 million. Miko received $3 million, plus the right to use the house. The other children received $1 or $2 million. Movita received nothing because the money she had received from Christian had already been spent. And for 10 years, the family had fought in court corridors, accused each other, and become enemies. There was no family anymore. Some siblings didn't speak to each other. Some lived in different countries and never saw each other. They didn't get together for holidays. They didn't visit Marlon Brando's grave. Because Brando didn't even have a grave. His ashes had been scattered in the wind, in the ocean, in the desert. Tetiaroa Island had come under the control of the Brando Foundation, and in 2014, a luxury eco-resort had opened on the island, with rooms costing $1,500, attracting wealthy tourists who vacationed in Brando's paradise. The children could go to the island, but only as guests paying for their rooms. This was Brando's final irony. He had shown his children a paradise as their inheritance, but a paradise they could never possess. Today, some of Brando's children are still alive. Miko lives in Los Angeles, in his father's house, but he is struggling financially because he cannot sell the house. Rebecca is retired, living a quiet life. The Tahitian children live on the island, working for the foundation, trying to manage their father's legacy. But none of them are happy. Because when Marlon Brando died, he left behind not only money, but also a curse. His will was more than a document, it was a message. I didn't love you, I didn't trust you, and even after death, I will control you. And for 10 years, the family lived with that curse, understood that message. Brando won. He always won. Because he was a genius actor, and his final performance was his will, the performance that succeeded in destroying his family.